this may be one of those reviews where I feel like I'm going against the grain of popular opinion on movies. We are talking Dark Glasses, also known as Black Glasses, although that is the English names of this Italian movie, directed by Italian maestro Dario Argento and co-stars his daughter, of course, Asia Argento. But leading up the cast is Ilenia Pastorelli as Diana, who is our main character. Now, I'll kind of explain what I meant in just a minute, but let me just give you a brief rundown of the plot. So it focuses on Diana's character, who is a prostitute, and she runs afoul of a serial killer who's been targeting prostitutes seemingly up until this point, but she is kind of pursued by him but gets away, but is actually injured in a car accident caused by this kind of maniac, and as a result she loses her sight. Now, she inadvertently in this accident kills a kind of a Chinese couple who have a young son, and she kind of ends up becoming this kind of child's kind of unofficial guardian for a short time, and they kind of work together to try and outsmart this killer who wants to kind of come out and finish the job. What'll happen? You'll have to watch the movie to find out. So, the kind of the critical perception of this movie, from what I've read so far, has largely been quite negative. Now, I feel a lot of this is actually down to the fact that people are comparing this movie to Dario Argento's kind of like older works. And I'll tell you right off the bat, although I've enjoyed Argento, Dario and Asia's kind of previous works, I'm not especially kind of precious about them, and nor am I a particularly massive Giallo fan, if I'm completely honest. I kind of like them, but I'm never massively into it. So maybe I've got into this movie with a little bit more of an open mind, not comparing this quite as much to his older works. And maybe that's kind of like why I've got a little bit more out of it. But there are some negativity here in regards to some of the reviews that I've seen that I just quite frankly disagree with. Number one, Diana, played by Ilenia Pastorelli, I actually thought was very good in the role. Now, I've seen pretty much nothing but negativity about her acting in regard to this movie, but they must be watching a different film, because I actually thought she was pretty good. I mean, she's a prostitute at the beginning of the movie. She loses her sight. She has this kind of like, obviously massive kind of change in her life. She ends up kind of looking after this kind of like little boy that she kind of bonds with, and you kind of feel that that maternal instinct. I gotta say, I thought the work here was pretty good. I mean, even very good. I honestly can't understand the negativity in regards to her acting, if I'm completely honest with you, because I thought the acting here was very, very good, and consistently through the movie. There are a little problems with some of the acting, which I'll come on to, but she's certainly the main character, and I thought she had an excellent performance in the movie, and her character, I think, is very well written. Now, the script of this was actually written back in 2002, I believe. It went as an unmade film. I would assume it's kind of been tweaked since then, but I think she's an interesting character, multifaceted. I thought her performance and the character that she was playing was an intriguing character, and I was along for the kind of the ride. She's quite kind of a sympathetic sort of character as well. So that was kind of one of the main critiques here, and I've got to say, it's quite an interesting kind of murder mystery. At least the first half of the movie I thought was really kind of quite strong, I have to say, with some strong visuals. And Argento's kind of direction, he's kind of a well-known director for a reason. I think, he has some kind of interesting kind of shot compositions and, transitions and things like that. I've got to say, Argento's a kind of, some would consider a legend for a reason, and this, his kind of early works may well be more well regarded, but I still think he's, he's a competent kind of director. I really enjoy some of the kind of the supporting characters here. We have this kind of Asia Argento turns up as a kind of like a blind person sort of counsellor. Thought she did a great job, and she's nearly unrecognisable, I have to say, in this role. Very kind of a dowdy kind of like look to her, but I thought she did a good job. And then we have these elements of violence, of which it's not tons. You know, we have a couple of kills in here. I've got to say, I thought they were quite effective and seemingly quite brutal. And there's also a reasonable kind of body count in the movie. You know, and it has it's a little bit flawed, which I'll come on to, but the climax is kind of quite exciting, I have to say. You know, we have a little, you know, trying to get away from this killer. You know, will he succeed? Won't he succeed? What will happen? And this kind of towards the end, obviously, it's quite an extended sequence where he's trying to kind of, you know, get the character of Diana and everything. I've got to say, I think it was flawed, but an interesting, you know, and an exciting sequence nonetheless. You know, and I got to say as well, we have a pretty decent soundtrack by Daft Punk. But I will transition to what doesn't work here, because I like this soundtrack, but I've got to say sometimes the soundtrack overpowers the film a little bit. You know, Daft Punk are quite a well-known, funky kind of like electronic band, and I will say there are times here where I do think the soundtrack, although very good, does somewhat overpower the movie. So outside of that, what can I say that doesn't work in this movie? For me, although I think the lead character is an interesting and well-acted character, the movie for me is definitely a movie of two halves, albeit I think how the character of Diana is consistent throughout. But the first half, I've got to say, was really strong. I thought it was a compelling kind of mystery. You know, we have this kind of our first kill that we see on screen. I think is pretty gruesome, and you know, it sort of punctuate. Otherwise, it's just a little bit of a kind of a more of a drama story more than anything else. And I would even get dare to say it was a little bit heartwarming. You know, with the kind of we have this kind of relationship building between Diana and Chin. But then we get to the second half, and it has some really silly elements in it. There's a sequence where we have, and I'll tell you exactly where it happens without because of spoiling. There's a sequence where we have a couple of police have a showdown with a killer. And it's at that point the movie gets a little bit silly. Because there are, I would say, at least 3 occasions in this movie where it just doesn't make any logical sense about what people are doing. It's nothing, I mean, these things don't really involve Diana, to be honest, but the policing is one of them. There's a sequence of what happens which really doesn't make any kind of logical sense in regards to how people would react, especially the police. Then we have a really stupid snake attack scene, kind of, you know, maybe in the last quarter. Very, very stupid. I don't know why it's in there. It borders on ridiculous. And then the kind of the finale, which I won't spoil as well. I don't know. It was just a bit silly. And the very, very end of the movie, it kind of ends on somewhat of a weird note, I will say. So to me, the first act I think is very strong. I think it's very kind of stylistic. I think the acting is all pretty good, with the exception of maybe the little Chinese kid Chin, whose acting is a little bit wonky. He's a child actor. I'm willing to give a little bit kind of leeway there, to be honest with you. But, you know, and the second half, I think it has some good elements, although it's punctuated through some very silly elements in the second half of the movie, which weren't really in. You know, the first half of the movie wasn't all that silly. It was kind of quite, you know, you could have watched it and was quite believable. That we had these very kind of silly elements that happen in the kind of in the latter half. But I still think there's some elements that do work in the second half. I still think it's quite an exciting movie and quite enjoyable. But it's a letdown compared to the first half of its kind of that dramatic tension kind of goes in favour of silly kind of set pieces, if you ask me. So, although I don't think this is, you know, a masterpiece, I do think it's still a worthwhile watch, I have to say. And yeah, maybe it isn't as good as Dario Argento's, you know, original kind of movies, his early movies, Suspiria and such, but I still think it's a fairly entertaining movie, a watchable movie. I certainly don't think it's the kind of the car wreck that kind of some people say it is. And I think the lead actress's performance was good, you know, not just fine, good. I thought it was well done, and I thought she did a good job of showing someone who is, you know, she's a prostitute, but she's kind of vulnerable, so she shows humanity. And I think that's all done whilst kind of acting blind, which I actually thought she'd done pretty well. So, I have to say, I think this movie is an above average movie. It's maybe not a masterpiece, but I think it's watchable. I think it could be classed as a good movie. Maybe not a great movie, but certainly good. I will give this one a 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I'll look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.